Greetings, fellow lamb fanatics. Lily White Lilith of lilywhite.com here, coming to you today from the South Beach Studios in Miami Beach, Florida. Well, last night at the Hard Rock Cafe in Hollywood, Florida, I took in my 7th Lamb Lies Down on Broadway concert, uniquely staged by the Musical Box, as they return from their triumphant winter tour of Europe and the United Kingdom. Well, they're heading their way right now up the east coast of North America back to their home city of Montreal for their final concert of this exquisite and historically accurate production. And as many of you know who have attended their concerts, a great deal of that accuracy is reflected in and through the vintage instruments that TMB painstakingly assembled and now use to give us a musical reenactment as close to the real sound of the original tour of the Lamb by Genesis in 1974 and 75. Well, last October, I was given a quick, impromptu, behind-the-scenes tour of these vintage instruments by the musical director of the Musical Box, Sebastian Lamoth, just prior to my camera crew arriving to do a fully lit sit-down interview with him. And even though my handheld research video was shot on a darkened stage and accomplished quickly during the band's lunch break, the subject matter was so fascinating and the collection of instruments so awe-inspiring, I realized right then and there that I needed to film yet another video series based on just that backstage experience alone. And thus, the Analysis Vintage Instrument Tour of collection of videos was born, with many gifted and knowledgeable collaborators sharing their expertise, insights, and mutual love of early Genesis with us, the faithful. So as I release my newest, long-awaited BankSynths video, hosted by Grammy Award-winning producer and Gabriel remix engineer Tom Lord-Alge, and former Giraffe keyboardist and Sonic Reality CEO Dave Kersner, I wanted to share with you the original impetus to the Vintage Instrument Tour series itself. Dishing out my fail-safe superlative, here now is my first impromptu flip-cam research video footage, shot in the fall at the Orpheum Theater in Phoenix, Arizona. It's not pretty, but it's incredibly informative. I hope that you enjoy. Okay, here is the setup for Tony's keyboards, the BankSynths, and this was circa 1974. And Sebastian's going to take us on a little tour of each of the instruments, if you would. So, first of all, we know that Tony played some 12-string in and around some of the pieces. So, there's a picture of the one that they use here for TMB. Now, why don't we start with the mellotron?
So, actually, very recently, we decided to acquire what is referred to as a DM mellotron, which is a digital mellotron now, which is pretty much giving us a much more stable environment for mellotron sounds. We had a lot of original mellotrons at the time, but we had so many problems with them, and we did not work with an original mellotron for quite a while, actually. Very unstable machines, sounds great, very difficult to work with on tour. So this is like the new era of the mellotron sounds, and we have access to many of the original sounds, because actually, if you pay close attention on the original albums, the Mellotron 400, as it was called, had only 3 sounds originally for live performances. So it was a smaller version of the big, huge Mellotrons like the Mark II, but also would limit the use, because there were only 3 original sounds. So the good part is that the digital version has got, like, I think something like 100 sound, including the original sounds of the Mark II, and on the albums, the Mark II was still used a lot, but because we can clearly hear some of these sounds being used.
Now those 3 sounds were strings, 8 voices, and then one other.
It was for the intro of Watcher, sorry. It was not the flute, so it was the brass sound.
And for a while, I hear that you were using a Kurzweil in an actual mellotron cabinet, so as to replicate during the earlier tours.
You know, Kurzweil or any, we used some keyboards as controllers, you know, with a MIDI system for sounds. but we felt that you know, the sound quality was not the same. It was not as accurate, and I mean, on this tour we really we really worked hard to really try to go back to the most basic original kind of setup that each Genesis musician would use, which really means if you get one sound, it comes from one machine, not from anything MIDI or any sampling effect or stuff like that. So the only difference on that kit compared to Tony Banks would be that, you know, obviously a big disappointment for Tony Banks has always been the fact that he would never have access to acoustic piano sounds, because there was no piano at the time that could fit in such a setup, a kit. So, but nowadays we have controllers that, you know, that are reproducing, you know, in an acceptable quality piano sounds, acoustic piano sounds. So, so we're using one keyboard for piano sounds only, and the rest, the classic, as used starting in '74 on the Selling England by the Pound tour, the electric piano called RMI, which supplanted, took over for the owner pianet that Tony Banks used to use in the earlier albums, and then the famous R Pro Soloist, which was Tony Banks' favorite keyboard for all his solos, basically from Selling England by the Pound and after, and the Hammond organ.
Now, I'm told that Tony used to take most of his instruments, his BankSynths, feed them through a mixer and then through a Leslie cabinet. Is that correct?
It mainly is a correct statement. As you can, there's a Leslie cabinet right there, used for organs, but also Tony Banks would, and that's kind of like a secret trade for Tony. You know, it's not generally known, but Tony Banks would use on certain pieces in certain specific moments, would either send the Mellotrons to the Leslies, also the electric piano, even his guitar. So this is, you know, it's not generally known, but this is completely part of his sound and of his recipe, and it makes it very unique.
So would this be your replica of
that's
the
a
mixer?
soundboard. That's a mixer. Yeah,
now,
absolutely. This one.
Is there anything else here on Tony's setup that you wanted to point out?
No, I mean, just again, what we're doing is sometimes using technology to reproduce old stuff. For example, you know, and this is true for all of us. The first echo effects that Genesis could have, like a lot of bands at the time, were echo tape echoes, as they would call them, right. And echoplex, echo boxes, some people would refer to. And obviously, because again, these machines are so old and so unstable, there's, you know, different machines out there that kind of replicates the effect and the sound and the warmth of such an echo. So we're using a Dan Electro effect that's called the real echo, which is kind of shaped and kind of made to really be a replica of the original tape. So obviously we would use that for echoes, and MXR pedals for phaser effects, and you know, we're using digital mixers also to be able to be a bit more accurate with certain effects like reverbs and stuff and intensity, because obviously Genesis were not able to go get so many details as they would have liked to in a live environment, compared to the album.
Phil Collins said that you guys did it better than they did, mainly because... Well,
that was, you know, very nice flattery. We appreciate that, but I mean, you know, Phil was being very gracious saying that. But I mean, obviously, certain form of technology is giving us a little edge on being able to be a bit more accurate. Because let's not forget, we always have the mission to bring on stage in a live performance studio effects. We always intend to bring as much as we can from the original albums on the stage.
This is the story of Rail. Yeah!
like me has just begun. Lord knows what I have done, and the land lies down. I'm Broadway, I'm Broadway, I'm Broadway, I'm Broadway. The city lights are always bright.